you could see that underneath the bones of what could be a pretty simplistic view of data resilience, we're really thinking about what the most crisp, articulate set of best practices are to measure. And he highlighted the fact that largely organizations around the world have a lot of risk exposure. And that's because one of the ways that we put this maturity model together was taking a look at actual organizations. So we've run this already through 500 organizations from around the world. And we'll talk a bit more about how we got there in just a minute. But to really quantify that, then we took a look at who the most mature were within that model. And we found that 74% of organizations fall into that Horizon 1, Horizon 2, or basic, maybe intermediate, a little bit reliable, but super limited on what you can do and whether or not you're confident that you can accomplish the outcomes your organization needs you to do. Aaron, I know when we've talked about this model before, these are a set of numbers that we've been really diving into. And throughout today's show, we're going to show different slices and dices of that first 500 data set. But why don't you talk a bit about kind of some of those other maturity layers and what some of the characteristics are that we look for?
Yeah, thanks, Leah. I mean, this one's kind of interesting because it kind of looks like 74% is a big number to be in 1 and 2. But I would say that, in that intermediate level, if you're quite mature within that band, you're probably doing everything you need to do to meet regulatory requirements, but there's still a huge upside in terms of further reducing risk and benefit to your organization. And it's kind of one of those things you have to look at some of the results and then stand back from the results to gather that picture as to what it takes to get someone into mature and adaptive and self-optimizing. And I think what it is that these organizations have built in a feedback loop and a continual drive to mature and improve. So they may be doing the same practices, but they know why they're doing them, and they're iterating on them and making them better and better each time, and therefore their outcomes are kind of shown in that. And a lot of times it boils down to they're very aligned to the business. The departments work together. They're highly aware of which are the most critical systems, and they've aligned their policies to match, as opposed to, well, here's the standard policy the organization signed up to, and everybody gets the same, the same outcome.
And, one of the things that we talked about on a show a couple of months ago is that regulatory compliance requirements continue to mature and change, especially as we look at different localized markets and different verticals. So just because you maybe passed an audit 2 years ago doesn't mean you're really ready for what your industry may be getting hit with in the months and even years ahead. So something that Aaron kind of highlighted that I want to put a finer point on is you may think you're good at X, but why? So a lot of what's really cool about models like this is that you can look at those dimensions of maturity, like we were showing on the slide before, and actually get quantified measurements of where your maturity is per dimension. So for example, you may find that your organization has pretty excellent backup. If you're in the Veeam community, hopefully that's the case. But you may find that across your organization, you're lacking in some other areas. Maybe you don't have some of the basic reporting capabilities in place that would help you automate some of these processes, stay ahead of whether or not you've achieved your leading indicators of success, for example. You may also find that your people and process is quite broken. We preach all the time on this show, and certainly in my last show, we talked about this with our own governance, risk, and compliance VP, that people and process is where a lot of the breakdown tends to happen. Are you sitting down and having meaningful conversations between IT operations teams and security operations teams? We find that that's not the case oftentimes, that everybody stays in their silos. So these are all different mechanisms that you can really improve with step-up improvements to reach different levels of maturity depending on your risk exposure. So we're actually going to do something really cool. I keep teasing the fact that you can measure things per dimension. Normally on the show, I spend some time drafting some poll questions to just keep the conversation going with you all in the community. But we have a very special treat today. What Aaron and I wanted to do is we actually wanted to give you guys a sneak preview of some of the questions that land in our data resilience maturity assessment. And in fact, the Veeam team is going to be publishing a short pulse check version of this assessment in the months ahead. So stay tuned to our socials, stay tuned to Veeam.com.